Alan Stratton from Woodturning. Before SWAT, I reviewed the agenda and saw a presentation where Greg Stehle was to make a vase out of OSB. I attended it. He did a great job, solved a lot of very interesting problems with his vase. However, before I went, I made this one that you've seen. This is with OSB, but my preference was to turn it OSB on its side so that you see the top surface flakes in the side. However, this was mighty difficult to turn because the OSB tended to flake out, and I did not drown it in CA glue. So I decided to try again after I got my stabilizing rig set up and do this vase. Now, it's still face grain out, which is my preference. I break it up a little bit with this cherry wood, which I think makes a nice accent. But I was also able to do a little bit more of a flare here on this, which I prefer over this one. This one was flaking too much in order to do much of a flare. So instead, this one, stabilized OSB, is really hard, I must warn you, and it turned a cheap wood into an expensive wood. But my preference is this one still. I'll use stabilized OSB in some future projects, probably sparingly, but it's a nice effect, and let's turn this one now. I recently completed my stabilizing rig. I started a long time ago, but was interrupted by my move from Oregon to Utah. Originally, I had purchased a 4-inch diameter, 14-inch long cylinder from Turntex. Before I got it operational, I also purchased a 5-gallon Baco Engineering vacuum pot on Amazon. The cylinder is for stabilizing sticks, the pot is for stabilizing rings and other projects. My pump is a 2-stage vacuum pump from Harbor Freight. When using the pot, the Turntex cylinder functions as a trap. Unfortunately, it cannot return the favor. I have updated many fittings and tubes. This will still evolve as I gain experience. I had to be careful in equipment selection since acrylic does not work and play well with cactus juice, the stabilizing resin. For this project, I ripped OSB into strips, sanded it smooth, and glued it together. Then the long process of extreme drying, vacuuming, soaking, and baking to cure. Then cleaned up the strips again before turning the blocks face out to display the face instead of the edge. Then on to the usual segmenting process to glue the segment blocks into rings. I use a large number of threaded wood faceplates in segmenting. Before this picture, I inset another piece of OSB to serve as the bottom. Now the cherry base ring is being glued to the first OSB ring. The cherry is firmly glued to the waste block with wood glue. With a tall, thin vase hanging off the waste block, I cannot risk using double-stick tape here. Then I can flip it around to start adding more rings. How about another cherry ring to separate the OSB? I clamp it for at least 10 minutes, then I can remove it from the lathe to do other operations. After an hour, I can do light tooling. Now another OSB ring, slightly larger. Another cherry ring. I face off the previous ring on my metal lathe. It does a great job of facing off. Yet another OSB ring, again larger, but I've trimmed the previous rings inside and out, while the vase was not so deep. Another ring of cherry and the final OSB ring. The vase is ready for the first cherry ring for the top. Then another cherry ring so that the cherry is bricklayed for strength. Remember that all along this process, as the glue was barely hard enough, I have been trimming both the inside and the outside of the vase. It was simply easier this way. After an overnight drying time, it is ready for some real lathe work. Actually, it has been real all along, but chopped up. Now with my box scraper, I can trim the inside of the top cherry ring. I like the box scraper partly because the pressure is directly in line with the turning axis. This is a long, skinny vase. Too much lateral pressure could be dangerous. The wood streams out almost as if it were green wood. Then start the curve with a spindle gouge. Gently. With a faceplate mounted on the life center for stability, I can work the exterior with a spindle gouge. Boy, this stabilized OSB is hard. I also try a round nose scraper to see how it goes. The OSB is just hard. Back to the spindle gouge with a shear cut, mostly. I still need to smooth the joint between the last rings with the lower rings. For this, I am experimenting with a stabilizer from Ron Brown's Best. This stabilizer prevents the tool handle, in this case a scraper, from lifting. While it was limited by my scraper blade length, I call that a success. I am able to smooth the joint in this hard wood. Then back to the last details to finish my vase until I am satisfied with the shape. Then a thorough sanding through all the grits. I try to wait several days for any moisture from the glue to stabilize before final sanding. For this vase, I am using rattle can lacquer sprayed on layer by layer to build it up. Unfortunately, this usually develops an orange peel texture. I wet sanded this lacquer with 220 grit and water, being careful not to sand through the finish. Then more lacquer to build it back up. Now to finish the base, I'm using my wood soft jaws instead of a jam chuck. This is a new set of wood jaws open to a good place. After marking an appropriate diameter, I cut the jaws to a profile to mate with the vase. My vase is still attached to the waste block. However, the bottom is being held by the live center, which provides amazing stability while parting it off. The light trimming to finish up, I am now firmly addicted to the wood soft jaws. A little more spray lacquer to finish up. That completes my stabilized OSB vase. The grain pattern is amazing. Stabilizing enabled me to use OSB faces that would otherwise splinter and flake off. However, it also turned a cheap wood into an expensive wood. The alternative is probably a lot of CA glue. Not chip either or brittle. I do not like the OSB side grain pattern. I do like OSB face pattern. In the end, I really like this vase. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website, and tell your friends about my videos. I appreciate your comments and questions. Every week I add a new wood turning video to my website. Always, please wear your full face shield anytime the lathe is running. A face shield saved my life. If you use yours, I'll be able to see you again next week. If you do not use it, my condolences to your family.